Hello and a warm welcome to this special edition of To The Point, where we look at the year that was and challenges in the year 2016 for the Narendra Modi government from the points of view of governance, economy, foreign policy and perception management. We will have not one but three editorial experts to dissect and analyze what could be perhaps the future direction of the NDA government for 2016. Joining me now is Mr. Gautam Adhikari, who is Senior Fellow at Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. He's been the Executive Editor of the Times of India and has been the founding editor of DNA. Let me tell you, he's also written a book, The Intolerant Indian, so lots to talk to him. We also have, as one of our guests, the most significant voices on economy, veteran editor, Economic Times, Mr. T.K. Arun. And our third guest is a popular voice as well as one of the most sought-after political commentators in the country, senior journalist Saba Naqvi. Welcome to all of you on this special edition of To The Point. Let me begin by quoting what former US President George Bush had once said when this India-US nuclear deal was signed. That was that things change, times change, and the leadership can make a difference. Now that the Narendra Modi government has completed about a year and a half and we are almost entering the new year, let me begin by asking Saba, do you think now that the leadership has really made a palpable difference to the country? How would you really look ahead?
I mean, the leadership has had a very difficult year. If you're talking about the leadership that rules Delhi, the national,
Yes.
they've had a very, very terrible year. The 2015 began with a terrible loss to the Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, during which time the Prime Minister also made certain mistakes, such as the clothes that he wore to a particular meeting, which diminished his standing after that. Then they came up with land acquisition. Around as summer thing, they came up with the land acquisition policy, which rebounded on them in a terrible way. Then you had Vyapam and Lalit Gate. You know, I'm just giving you the year that's gone on for the BJP. Then you had Vyapam and Lalit Gate. Then they went back to Bihar, another grand election, one began here, and they made another series of blunders, and this time I would say also the Sangh Parivar made the RSS chief and the party president of the Bharatiya Janata Party.
A series
then
of
they
political
got back
mistakes.
to parliament. So they've had a terrible year, and they themselves know it, they say it. They've had a disastrous year. You know, so at the end of the year, we have the Prime Minister pulling the rabbit out of the hat of this Pakistan trip, which is innovative. At the way,
we'll discuss about that later. But let me ask Mr. Adhikari, how would you look at probably the year that was in terms of the way Narendra Modi has ruled the country, in terms of governance, in terms of administration? How would you really look at the year?
Well, I think the start of this government, there was a lot of hope and expectation, at least amongst a lot of people, that there would be things that would change. I'm not saying necessarily that that was a correct set of expectations, but it was there. And it was there not just in India, but abroad. And since I'm usually stationed abroad, the perception there was that this is a time when India is set for taking off and, you know, in multiple areas. I don't think that perception remains any longer. At this point of time, there's some skepticism about the overall prospects of India. And I think that what it is externally,
The entire world, Mr. Adhikari was talking about the out-of-the-box ideas which Narendra Modi government perhaps would bank on, and that perception, you'd say, has dwindled quite a lot now.
Yes, there was a lot of talk of out of the box perhaps, but what was in the box nobody talked about, and that was a problem because, you know, you can go out of the box, but you have to come out and express something very solid and an alternative set of ideas. I don't think that really came up, and perhaps it's too early, I don't know, it would depend on a lot of things. But the outside perception has grown a little more skeptical. Besides, there's other things happening all around the world.
So hope to skepticism, that is...
but domestically also, I think, if you look at the election results that have...
That's also not been very encouraging.
Delhi, the domestic reaction also has not been that positive towards what has happened with these. But these are state elections, of course, there are many other factors involved.
But TK, if I could ask you, in terms of economy, do you look at any positivity in the year that has gone by?
See, let us understand this government assumed office in a very bad circumstance. The global economic growth scenario has been particularly bad. World trade growth, for example, has been below world GDP growth for the first time after many, many years. So our exports have reflected this reality by declining month on month for past 7-8 months. The global demand for goods and services is so weak that exports cannot actually add much to our overall domestic growth. We had a huge investment boom without really watching out for the sustainability of that investment before this government came to power. A large number of our infrastructure companies are saddled with debt, bad debt, which they are finding struggling to service. Now, did this government succeed in tackling these problems effectively? Actually, they haven't.
But how did that number of 8 to 8.5% GDP growth, which the people were arriving at just a few months ago, how did that figure come about? Was there a change in the methodology of arriving at the GDP, or it was some kind of a mixed signal which probably the earlier government couldn't gauge and the present government has gauged? What was it exactly?
No, 8.5% is still an aspirational growth.
It's an aspirational growth.
Yeah. The achieved growth rate is 7.3% last year.
Right.
And so far for the second
which
quarter.
Which is a little higher than what the UPA government had achieved.
No, the UPA government last year, 2013-14,
right,
had already under the new GDP series
right,
registered a growth rate of 6.9%, which is a far cry from the declining below 5% growth under the old GDP growth series.
Okay.
So the turnaround had already been achieved.
Okay.
It has continued, the momentum has carried forward, and the growth rate has accelerated to 7.3% in 14-15. So let us see, it will possibly at least sustain at that rate and be a little higher in this current financial year.
But do you see...
But see, the overall changes that are required to give additional momentum at the level of policy, that hasn't really happened.
Because the tax reforms, the finance sector reforms, all that is pending, and it...
No,
and
the most significant reform that is required has just been introduced in Parliament, which is the bankruptcy code. If you want companies that are saddled with unserviceable debt to be rescued, and the projects which are grinding them to a halt to be released from the thrall of bad debt, you need a bankruptcy code.
So that is one legislative silver lining you could...
So that has only been introduced. It should have been passed by now.
Okay.
So this is something that the government really cannot really take any great credit for.
But Saba, when you talk about the legislative agenda of the government and what we have been talking about economy, that, the government hasn't really taken off, as far as the economy is concerned and other aspects as well. What do you think, the way you were talking about, that there has been a huge perceptual change in the way the Modi government has been looked upon? What do you think has been the lowest point of the last 1 year in which, by which the way Modi government has basically ruled?
They've obviously had a problem with perception management. On the economic agenda, I'm not very clear whether TK is saying that it's the global factors in the way world economies are, which is responsible for whatever is happening here. And could the government have really done very much? I don't know that, because I'm not an expert on that at all. I can't make that out. But, there is one bit of this whole, I was earlier talking about from the Delhi election to the Bihar election, okay? Because in between you also had the intolerance debate.
And that probably was...
No. Now what happened over there? You had a lynching in a part of India, and there was there was a lot of time between the political response, the adequate political response. In fact, the leadership said nothing very much. So they lost the plot in the way you respond to things. So they've done that very badly. And there's another lesson.
So you would say that they got their politics wrong somewhere?
I'm not talking about politics. I'm saying even if you have to respond to things that happen, especially if you are big on optics. You can't expect people to come and hear your Man Ki Baat and your televised debates abroad, and when you have nothing to say when something like this has happened. So and I'm also not coming to the final conclusion on this matter, because I think they carry the burden. The question that has plagued us through this year has been that, has all of this happened because there are certain groups which get emboldened because the Bharatiya Janata Party is in power, even though I have no doubt there are many people in the Bharatiya Janata Party who want normal things to proceed as normal. Right. But they also give cover to these other groups.
But
So the political leadership failed to respond.
The political leadership failed to respond. Mr. Adhikari, how would you look at it? I mean, as far as the debate on this entire intolerance debate which took off, would you see that as the biggest ailment from which the Modi government suffered in this year?
In terms of...
And probably it couldn't respond the way it should have been?
Well, in terms of image management, and that's very important in democratic politics.
Okay.
I think, yes, it has suffered considerably, both domestically, but very importantly internationally. India's great, what should I say, USP, as they call it fashionably these days, has been its tolerant democracy. This is the second largest country, about to be the largest country in the world, and it's a democratic country, and it's constitutionally very tolerant. You see, it's legally extremely tolerant. In terms of attitudes and...
You've written a book, The Intolerant Indian, and now that you see the intolerance as part of the entire political dialogue, what is the real problem? Is it the intolerance, the general intolerance of the society, or is it the general political intolerance of the various leaders we see, or the way the ideologies are panned out? What is wrong really in the discourse which is there?
I should clarify that my book is deliberately called The Intolerant Indian, and not Intolerant India, because there's a big difference between the two. Constitutionally, as I said, it's a remarkable document. It's a very tolerant document, and it promotes the kind of liberal secularism that should be the hallmark of any, what should I say, diverse kind of democracy that we have here, culturally diverse democracy that we have here. However, over the years, the management of that secularism, of that liberalism, has been extremely spotty. And I'm not blaming only the BJP government. Even before that, there was no...
You had cases earlier also of intolerance.
Yes, in many cases, I think there was pandering. The government of the day, whichever it was, pandered to certain vote banks, and it really diluted the concept of secularism in this country, where religion should be kept apart from the affairs of the state. But here you have a religious holiday for almost everybody, whether it's a Jain, Sikh, Mohammedan, or Hindu. I mean, I don't think there's any democracy on earth which calls itself secular, which has so many religious holidays. But that's merely a symbol out there. It's an example of what I'm talking about.
Right.
I don't think, by and large, the average Indian, the aspiring Indian, the young Indian, people of your generation, if I may say, are intolerant. I mean, they actually would like stability, growth, and peace. And they don't see things in these ethnic terms that it's we and they, and there's an other out there. But some or other, the politics of the situation, and particularly amongst the extreme right wing here, which is currently being somewhat, feels somewhat encouraged. And we have had enough incidents, some of which Saba talked about, to show that they are getting a lot of, I shouldn't say encouragement, but they are getting a lot of leeway.
But somewhere there's a feeling that probably the government could have managed this entire intolerance scenario a little better.
It has affected it internationally, I would say.
It has affected it internationally. DK, how would you take it before we go into a quick break?
Absolutely. I mean, as Saba said, this is a core issue. When something happens right in front of you, you have to react, and you react right. Narendra Modi, who actually embodies and gives voice to the government, he responded very late. And when he responded, it was very, very weak. He expressed sorrow that a man died. He did not express anger and anguish that somebody was killed. He didn't just die of a heart attack, he was killed by a mob. That was against democracy, against the law of the land. So as a Prime Minister, he had the responsibility not only to feel sorry for a death, but also anger and the determination to correct.
At least a statement of condemnation or something should have come from the Prime Minister.
And to enforce the law.
Right.
Yeah, that determination should have been there. That was missing. Okay. So this sort of diluted the entire government's ability to control the polity. But before I conclude, I must say one thing in this government's defense. While I think the previous UPA government's term was 10 years was great for India, for taking India forward, the perception of how that was being done was such that India felt leaderless.
Okay. That's an important point you're making.
Yeah, that was remedied because Modi is a leader. So he could project leadership. And a lot of people voted him thinking that he will use his leadership to take India forward. That promise has not been redeemed in actual practice.
So on that note, let me take a break. But when we come back, we talk about foreign policy and also perception management. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching this special edition of To The Point. TK, I would like to start from you. Before we went into the break, you made a very important point. Now, whatever political mistakes, whatever economic mistakes, so to call, which the country or the government has made, what really is the present government required to do so that, it changes in terms of perception, it changes in terms of the general scenario of the polity? How does it really change? What is the first urgent step which the government needs to take?
See, some of these things the government has started doing. For example, the sudden policy change on Pakistan.
Okay.
It is, I think, purely designed to address the domestic audience and send out the message.
Kabul to India via Lahore.
So that we actually want communal harmony. We don't want any violence. It's that message. Number two, investment in this economy is possible only in the infrastructure sectors.
Okay.
All consumer goods sectors have spare capacity. So they can't really invest.
Okay.
And infrastructure is saddled with debt by and large. But two areas where it is still possible to absorb investment, the railways and the roads, have decent ministers in charge. And they have created a situation right now
so
where...
it needs to increase its spending in railways and other infrastructure projects.
Yeah. So, and all the money doesn't need to come from the government. They are raising funds from by borrowing, by setting up special companies, special vehicles, and leveraging the balance sheet of existing assets to raise extra money and invest. So I think both the railways and the road sector will be able to show some good growth, which should actually create some momentum for the economy at large. So this is something that is good that is happening.
But would this momentum be possible, Mr. Adhikari, what TK is talking about, when the government is not able to reach out to the opposition in some way or the other? They don't have that kind of a cordial relation at the moment. There will be a budget session followed by future sessions. Would that be really possible? How difficult would the legislative agenda of the government be? I mean, for example, take the example of GST, which there's no meeting ground still.
It will be difficult because the government does want a majority in the Rajya Saba to push through the legislative program. And it hasn't been able to do that, and Bihar has not really helped them in that case. However, the reality of India is that India is governed not just from Delhi. It is governed through the states. And I must say that this government and, well, the Finance Commission has recognized the importance of a devolution of power to the states. I think in the coming years and the remaining years of the Modi government, if that process can be efficiently managed and systematized, I think overall it would lead to I mean, this is in no way contradicting what TK is saying out here, because the infrastructure investment that he talked about is vitally necessary, and that has to be driven forward from the government at the center. But it is the problem is that much of the implementation of all this, like cost overruns and all that, it happens at the state level. And so efficiency at the state level is also necessary, but there's a lot of power that has to be devolved.
But it's always seen it's easier said than done, despite the fact that Modi government has been talking hugely about cooperative federalism. It's in practice that has not been there. In fact, the political parties like Trinamool Congress, Derek O'Brien went ahead and said that no, it's not cooperative federalism, it's political federalism which is being actually practiced. So will that be a big challenge for the coming year?
It's actually very unfortunate but sometimes on a lighter note, our politics in Delhi now looks like Tamil Nadu model of politics, where you have great vendettas against the other party. It looks something like that. So but that's obviously a challenge right now. Politics has become so, the lack of cooperation and all, but some of it is the government's fault, but I don't think we have time to get into that. But I'll just say one thing. You're talking about the future and all. I think Mr. Modi's has, after a year when he was sort of stage managing these events, and he appeared to be hemmed in, and people were saying whatever they want, this sudden innovation, this rabbit out of the Mr. Modi's hat in Pakistan, at the very least, it shows that he wants to break out of the box.
Okay.
He wants to do something which is different. Now we can, we can
so
have
despite
many takes
all
on
the
it.
negativity, some kind of a turnaround is
And
possible.
the signal is that Pakistan, if you look at the history and the rhetoric of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Pakistan is like a grand internal obsession.
Right.
Because it's internal, it's not just a foreign country, it's rhetoric. Pakistan is code word for Muslims. You can't directly go around saying, so you say Pakistan. I mean, the BJP guys, it's a code word.
Right.
So it's always interesting. So does it indeed signal? I don't know. Does it indeed signal that Mr. Modi wants to shed some of his old skin?
Okay.
Will he be allowed to go forward? He's not an analytical individual. He is an instinctive politician. So have we seen the politician now come out, and will he move ahead? And will he be able to? I mean, you always have the glorious backing of the Sangh Parivar and they are such a and various other elements in the Bharatiya Janata Party, and ministers and party president and all, they've all used the Pakistan code word.
Right. But would you, Mr. Adhikari, would you see Modi's trip to Lahore and meeting Nawaz Sharif as one of the biggest turning points by which probably the political discourse also now would change and also the opposition parties, the way they're looking at the government?
I think we should...
Maybe for 2016?
We should be clear that what's happening in Pakistan is also a factor here, which is that Nawaz Sharif himself was in the doghouse for certain reasons on the India-Pakistan relationship front. This would help Nawaz Sharif domestically to show that there's something positive going on there. Secondly, it would, of course, as Saba says...
So are each of the prime ministers addressing a community of hawks in their own country?
That is so, because the reality in Pakistan is that security and strategic affairs and foreign policy in general is not controlled by the civilian government.
Right.
So you can talk endlessly.
Right.
But unless we know what exactly Nawaz Sharif is saying to the other Sharif, and what the nature of that dialogue is, and what the future attitude of the Pakistani army is towards this relationship, we can't really say that it's a very substantive thing. But of course, it's a good measure. There's no doubt about it.
But when you talk about the foreign policy, Narendra Modi has been criticized a lot by the opposition parties for more than 20 trips a year and a very proactive foreign policy. How would you really look at what is now the biggest challenge for Modi? Because diplomats like Shyam Saran, they have said that now the biggest task before Modi is to fulfill the commitments which so many deals have been inked, but now the biggest challenge is the implementation. How does he implement those deals? And would you also say that that's the biggest challenge for the coming year?
I would say something more. I agree with this.
Yeah.
You know, we messed up one of the most vital relationships we have, that is Nepal.
Right. Yeah.
We have always had good relations with Nepal. Well, not always, but, you know, it has never been as bad as it is now. So that is very surprising. I don't think this government really wanted this to happen.
Right.
But this ultimately happened under his watch. So while overall, all his foreign trips and so on and so forth, however people might ridicule them, they have helped actually project India's soft power, project India's actually economic potential in a way that did not happen in the past. So that is actually good. But when it comes to handling real issues, he didn't show much adroitness when it came to something like Nepal. Now, coming back to reviving growth and the legislative agenda, we should be clear, India since 1989 hasn't had a single government which had a majority both in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. But governments have governed, laws have been passed, the economy has grown at spectacular rates, all because of political management. So you need to engage the opposition and take it along.
Engaging the opposition.
Yeah, so that is key. So if there is failure on that front, you won't be able to pass vital laws that are required to carry the economic momentum further ahead.
But Saba, was there not any kind of obstinacy also seen as far as the opposition was concerned? Because no amount of lunches and tea sessions seem to have worked during this parliament session.
The opposition's job is to make things difficult, but I will just add to what TK is saying. The point is, just look at the recent session.
Right.
I mean, it's just pure political bad management. And a lot of the problems that the government is facing, be it ideological and be it managerial or be it what has happened to other parties' attitudes, be it the rhetoric that then comes about, it's because of actions of their own MPs. It's not the tolerance-intolerance debate. So it's really, you know, and yet, so if you look at the details, it's actually things that they have mismanaged.
Okay.
So they need to get a grip on themselves. You know, even the Bihar loss was as much due to the Grand Alliance, but surely the statement of the RSS chief,
Right.
which
Mohan Bhagwat's
also
comment
had
on
a role in
reservation.
it. So half the problems are created by themselves.
But,
you know, so,
Mr. Adhikari, in terms of political management, managing the opposition, what is the most urgent step which the government needs to take? A corrective measure, probably, which probably could be salvaging opposition, probably in the budget session, coming budget session.
Well, I can't talk about any single step like that, but all I can say is that you have to create...
Because the perception of the government has taken a huge beating.
Yes, because I talked of decentralization to states. That's one step that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
But there must be decentralization at the central level also. You cannot run a country like India from the Prime Minister's office.
Okay.
It has to have a range of efficient ministries handling various tasks with power, with the ability to take decisions across the board. One of the big achievements earlier, I think, of various, I should say, even during the first phase of the Manmohan Singh government, was that he had a very good team that was operating with him. I'm not so sure that the current team is, there are some very efficient ministers, but the decentralization that needs to take place, even at the central level, has to be looked at very closely. That is part of political management.
So devolution apart from of power to states and also decentralizing. TK, what would be your prescription?
See, the government cannot run unless they do everything.
Okay.
You have to take the opposition along. See, on GST, for example, the Congress has put forward 3 conditions. But if the BJP accepts these conditions, there is no way the government, the Congress can actually then refuse to support the bill. So if the government is serious about getting the GST through, all it has to do is to accept these 3 conditions. Now, and those 3 conditions, to my mind, are eminently acceptable.
Okay.
So if you do that, you will have a GST in this country. So if there is a will to actually get a legislative agenda accomplished, it is possible to do that.
But Saba, do you see that happening with a kind of acrimonious battle in the House and outside the House we've seen?
You know,
do you see that
the Finance Minister, Mr. Jaitley, has been saying that he thinks that the future is money bills and executive actions. Money bills, as you know, do not need to be passed by the upper house.
Okay.
He's been saying these have been his remarks about the future after a frustrating session for them. But they've certainly, even a simple thing like the raid in the Delhi Secretariat. And now they've said, of course, that the CBI is entirely independent and is an independent organization that is there, and they have no clue what is happening. All of this is bad timing when a session is going on. That means you can't even manage your own, or is, you know, and also...
So this is one big challenge.
Also, the government has to stop looking vindictive. That is when you're going to get people. You have to, you can give details about each case.
So Modi government has to change a lot in terms of governance, in terms of perception management, in terms of managing the allies. So it's very clear that the year 2016 for Modi government will be an acid test, not only for him, but for the entire country as far as governance and economy are concerned. Thanks to all my guests for sparing time at a moment when people are holidaying in this festive mood. Wishing you all a very happy new year from our entire team. Goodbye and thanks for watching.